Storyteller's Thread, a monthly podcast devoted to young adult literature and the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Sean Connors. On each episode, we invite an author for young adults to take us inside their work, and in doing so, to talk about their writing process, their inspiration for writing for young readers, and the general ins and outs of earning a living as a professional storyteller. So, whether you're a compulsive reader, an aspiring writer, a teacher or librarian, or simply a frustrated reader who's counting the hours until you get home and dive back into that novel that's waiting for you on your nightstand, this is the place for you. Hey everyone, it's September 1st. If you're a first-time listener, thanks for making time to give this scrappy little podcast a listen. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. It's good to be with you again, and as always, I appreciate your support. This month, our guest is Ashley Poston, an author for young adults whose work I came across about maybe 2 years ago in the course of working on a project that focused on young adult adaptations of the Cinderella fairy tale. Someone happened to tell me in passing about a new book, Geekerella, that had just come out and which took the Cinderella story and set it in the middle of a pop culture convention. I mean, who can pass that story up, right? So my interest was piqued. I picked up a copy of the book, read it, and instantly became a fan of Ashley's. When I tell other people about Geekerella, I always start off by saying that at its core, it's essentially a love letter to fandom and pop culture. If you read the book, you'll see what I mean. It's loaded with references to all of the meaty franchises that you know and love, from Star Trek to Star Wars to Firefly. And as an adaptation, it's just fantastically creative. I mean, what else can you possibly say about a book that reimagines Cinderella's fairy godmother as a green-haired lesbian who aspires to a career in fashion design and who manages a vegan food truck called the Magic Pumpkin? Needless to say, I read Geekerella in a couple of days, and I'm not sure I remember ever having laughed out loud so many times while reading a book. And that's part of what Ashley's going for as a writer. As you'll hear, she's an advocate for stories that sweep us off our feet and entertain us. The kind of stories that tend to get written off as inferior compared to literature with a capital L, by which I mean the books that aspire to offer profound meditations on life and which take themselves way too seriously in the process. As you'll hear Ashley say, at the end of the day, we need both kinds of stories. And so this month, we're embracing our inner fan here at the Storyteller's Thread and celebrating the stories that delight and entertain us. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ashley. If the story behind Ashley Poston's path into writing fiction for young adults feels like a fairy tale, that's only fitting, considering that the book that led her to realize her dream of becoming a published author is itself based on a fairy tale. A self-avowed fangirl and pop culture enthusiast, Poston grew up in rural South Carolina, where, as a middle school student, she developed an affinity for writing fan fiction. In the years that followed, the mentorship, encouragement, and support that she received from other members of her fanfic community motivated her to continue writing stories that played with well-known tropes. After graduating from the University of South Carolina, where she majored in English, Poston worked a variety of jobs, including stints as a barista, a hotelier, a clerk, and a freelance cover designer. Throughout that time, though, she continued to pursue her dream of becoming a published author. She received her break when an editor at Quirk Books invited her to audition for a book project that took the Cinderella fairy tale as the basis for a story about a fangirl who meets her Prince Charming at a pop culture convention. Poston landed the job, and her subsequent novel, Geekerella, proved to be a hit with readers. This past April, she published a companion book, The Princess and the Fangirl, which revisits the story world she explored in Geekerella and which is loosely based on Mark Twain's short story, The Prince and the Pauper. If Geekerella is a love letter to fandom and pop culture, The Princess and the Fangirl examines fandom's darker side, including the boundaries that fans sometimes overstep in their quest to protect the media properties they love. In addition to her Once Upon a Con books, Poston is also the author of the Heart of Iron duology, a romping space opera that's inspired by the story of Anastasia. Looking at her career, it's not hard to see how her roots in fan fiction continue to shape her work as a writer. I recently talked with Poston, who is currently working on the third book in her Once Upon a Con series, an adaptation of Beauty and the Beast, about her path into publishing. During our conversation, we touched on a range of topics, including the role that she believes writing fan fiction can play in honing a writer's skill set, the challenges that come with adapting well-known stories, and the value that she finds in stories that sweep readers away. I'll start off by saying that if this conversation is half as entertaining as the books that you're writing, we are in for a heck of a time.
Yay!
So one of the things that I've come to appreciate as a result of talking with different writers over the course of this past year is the extent to which pieces of their lives are woven into the stories they tell. So with that in mind, where in your books can readers look to find snippets of Ashley Poston's biography?
Gosh, that's a really tough question, actually, because I grew up on Tumblr, basically. I grew up on LiveJournal and the internet and message boards and RP communities. So there's so much of me in both Geek and Princess that it's really hard for me to pinpoint certain places. Like, there are parts of Elle that I really identify with, like her drive to be a better fan and to, fangirl unabashedly. And then there are parts of Imogen that I like wholeheartedly love, like her unironic enthusiasm, which I think we all need more of, honestly. And like now that I'm an author in a public space, I also identify with Jess a lot too, because like it's hard living like with like your life open to the public, basically, because you have to be on Instagram and Twitter and you have to basically perform and be this brand or this character. So there's a lot of them that I like. They're like pieces of me, but I don't think any of the characters are me as a whole. I would like to be like Elle or like Imogen or like Jess, but I'm not nearly that cool.
But you are a fangirl.
Oh, 100%.
So how did you come to writing, Ashley?
I started writing when I was about 12 or 13, and it was because I stumbled upon this thing called fanfic, and it was just really weird because I was like, man, these people are writing about characters that I watch on TV. So that just blew my mind. So I was like, well, I want to do that. So I started reading all the fanfic I could, and so I am so well versed in the tropes of fanfic. It's not even funny. Like on my gravestone is probably going to be Ashley, trope queen.
Do you remember what drew you to fan fiction initially?
I think it was like the unironic enthusiasm of liking something so much that you wanted to create art about it. And also like fanfic is a great way to like also take out your frustrations about something that happens in canon in a story that you like might not like a character being fridged or a relationship not panning out the way you think it will. And so that gets into like canon chips and like non-canon chips and OTPs and all that. And so I don't know. I think the entire community just drew me in. How like I would write something and there'd be so many awesome comments about, oh my gosh, you're getting better with every story. And it was it was really great for like 13, 14-year-old me who had a really bad speech impediment. So I used to stutter really, really badly. So a lot of people would pick on me for that. And so like I was always the quiet kid, but online when I was writing stories, I didn't have to be quiet and I wasn't quiet. So
you referred a moment ago to fan fiction as art. Can you talk about that? I think that would surprise a lot of people, right? To think of fan fiction as a form of art. Why do you see it as a form of art?
I see it as a form of art because I don't think everyone can take like a character that is developed in a writer's room, basically. Like say if you say like a TV show or a movie. A lot of people like make this character, but to have one person write in character, it's a great character study and it's a fantastic way to like hone your craft And that in and of itself is an art form. And also, like, people don't have unlimited hours in the day to do whatever they want to. And so for a fic to be noticed online, it has to be really good. And so I think that like fanfic is just as important as like actual fic, like books and fiction. And I think it's just like a different way of telling the stories that you want to see in your life. And I think it's a great form of art. I don't know, like say like Cinderella, Geekerella. It's basically a fanfic of Cinderella, because I'm taking something that's already known and I'm just retranslating it basically into like a pop con culture. So I don't see a big difference in that. And I have another series that's basically Anastasia in space. And that's also a retelling. And a retelling is also basically a fanfic, because you're still taking a story that everyone already knows, or a trope everyone already knows, and translating it into like another scene or another type of story.
Have you read Rainbow Rowell's novel Fangirl?
Oh yeah, I love it. So good.
If you remember, her protagonist has an encounter with a creative writing professor who questions fan fiction's legitimacy because she regards people who write it as essentially playing with other people's property without creating anything new themselves. And I'm curious, as someone who has substantial experience writing fan fiction, how would you respond to that criticism?
I would say that that's a very narrow-minded view of what fanfic is, because a lot of the times in fanfic, it's not like the fanfic doesn't go off of canon. It goes off of like a coffee shop AU or an alternate universe where they just take these archetypes and they use them as they are in this TV show or this book, and they translate it into another story. Like it's not like fanfic is ripping like the story from its original material and just rewriting it again. It's making something new out of something that's already there. So I would say that it's like that writing professor just needed to read a little more fanfic and figure out what OCs are and why Mary Sue is a thing, and that started in the fanfic community. So
you mentioned a moment ago that fan fiction is a wonderful way to stretch your skills as a writer. When you think about your experiences writing fanfic, what has the experience contributed to your own writing toolkit, do you think?
Writing fanfic really helped me stay on a writing schedule, because if you updated your fic like maybe once in a blue moon, you wouldn't get that many hits or that many readers. But if you kept with it to a schedule, then it was easier to get more readers, because you would be at the top of the algorithms. And so writing fanfic helped me like figure out how I wrote during the day, and like what my weaknesses are and what my strengths are. And so like I'm really good at character encounters and meet cutes, but I'm really bad at info dumping. That is the one thing that I'm terrible at. And I know that from fanfic. Since I started writing fanfic when I was younger, like that gave me the opportunity to explore my own craft and how I like to write, and in what tints and what type of characters I like to write. And in what situations I liked to put these characters in the most, and what I was really good at. So like that's how fanfic kind of helped me develop as a writer.
I came across an interview where you said that you find that writing fan fiction is also one of the best ways to understand character and character development. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's the case, or why you found that to be the case?
I find that to be the case because if a character that you're writing is like super non-canon, like if you like say if you're writing Dean from Supernatural, but like nowhere in the story does he want to go get a burger, or does he drive like, you know, a really big muscle car. That's not really in his character. Like he likes food a lot, and he's very tough on the outside, and he's like a Hufflepuff on the inside. And so like readers will like call you out on that too. In the comments, they'll be like, oh, this is super OC, or like that's not how you would act. And so to like honor the character, and to also like get better at character development, and like sticking to like what a character would and wouldn't do, and how to figure out a scene situation with those characters in character. It helps you when you're writing your own fiction and you have these characters who maybe wouldn't do something a certain way. So you have to figure out how they would, you know, circumvent that, and how to keep your characters in character. Or if you want to change those characters, how to slowly change them throughout the story in a character arc.
I'm curious, are you aware of people who are writing fan fiction based on the story worlds that you're creating in your books?
Yeah, I really love it. It's really great. I haven't gotten a chance to read any of it because especially for the Geekerella series, I actually can't read the fanfic for legal reasons. But I just finished my sci-fi duology, and there's fanfic about it. So you bet I've like gone and read all the fanfic, and I just love all of it.
What is that experience like to go from reading fanfic and then writing it to now you're the source of somebody else's fanfic?
It's so cool. It feels like it just feels like one big circle where it's like you either contribute to the community or you like contribute like some like story that someone else like births a fanfic off of, and it just feels like this one big circle, like the circle of fandom life, I guess.
That must be pretty cool, though.
It is. It's really cool and very flattering.
I'm sure. I want to switch gears and talk about your novel Geekerella, which has been really popular and which has also helped bring you to the attention of a large number of readers. For listeners who haven't read it yet, and I would definitely encourage people to, can you offer a sense of what Geekerella is about?
Of course. My elevator pitch for Geekerella is it's Cinderella at a sci-fi convention. And that usually, hooks people right then. But it's about a girl named Elle who is the Cinderella of this story. And she lives with two evil stepsisters, and she accidentally gets the mysterious number of this really cool fan person who she just strikes up a conversation with, and they start texting back and forth over the course of a month. And little does she know that the other side of the phone is the person that she hates the most in real life, who is the newly casted actor for Carmendor, her favorite character in the reboot of her favorite TV series. So it's a little bit of You've Got Mail and a little bit of like Starstruck, that Disney movie that came out a long time ago. And for Geekerella, I just wanted to write a Cinderella story where the prince didn't save Cinderella, where she just saved herself. So that was like my main goal in writing Geekerella, was writing a Cinderella story where she basically saved herself from her predicaments.
So how did the opportunity to write Geekerella come about? Did you come up with the conceit for the story?
No, actually, I had written 2 books previously, and the editor who came to me about Geekerella, she was like, "Hey, I really like your voice and your books, and you're really geeky, and we think you would have picked for this story." And I'd already been like toying with this You've Got Mail sort of fandom story, but it was never really gelling all that well. So she was like, "What do you think about Cinderella at a sci-fi convention?" And I was like, "Excuse me? Yeah, sure, let's try it." So I auditioned, and somehow I got the job, and it's just been it's been a dream ever since. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't gotten Geekerella, because it was a story that I didn't know I needed to write until I started writing it.
When you said that you auditioned for the authorship, what would that entail? What does that look like?
It was basically my editor gave me a very, very, very brief summary of what she imagined Geekerella would be like. And I was like, that's kind of cool, but let's go a step further than that. So I wrote the first 3 chapters, or what I thought would be the first 3 chapters. I think only 1 chapter ended up being in the final of Geekerella. But so I auditioned with the first 3 chapters, and I sent it off, and apparently I was the coolest cat in the room.
So when you go into a situation like that where a publisher reaches out to you and offers the opportunity to work with a conceit that they have, like what kind of parameters, if any, are you given as a writer when you were contracted to write Geekerella? Like you mentioned, you didn't have the option to choose the fairy tale that came to you from the publisher. Are there other parameters that they say to you, we want you to work within, or do you just take the story where you want to go?
It really all depends on what publisher you sign with and who your editor is. I was very lucky to have an editor who believed in like me and my vision for this story, and so she was like, just go for it, just do whatever you want to. Because the original pitch was just from Elle's point of view, it wasn't from Darian's. So I was like, I think it'd be really cool if we could do this and add like that the whole texting subplot. And she was like, okay, go for it. So I have heard other stories where like they give you a very detailed outline and you have to go by that exact outline in some work for hires. But Quirk and my editor Blair, she really believed in me and she trusted me, and so she let me just do whatever I wanted to do, and that was quite amazing actually.
Oh, I would think so. And your follow-up to Geekerella, The Princess and the Fangirl, which I believe came out this past April.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about that book momentarily, but that's also based on The Prince and the Pauper.
Yes, it's based on a Mark Twain short story.
Oh, it's a short story.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious with the fairy tale. Is there something about the form that appeals to you as a writer, or was your decision to work with it simply dictated by the contractual obligations that you were under?
I really, really enjoy fairy tales and any sort of retellings. That's why my non-IP duology, Heart of Iron and Soul of Stars, are based on an Anastasia-esque motif. It's more like a Lost Princess, but it's easier to shorthand for Anastasia because everyone knows the story of Anastasia. But yeah, I really like retellings, and young adult books are really like keen to retellings. They're very, very popular. For The Princess and the Fangirl, my editor gave me the fairy tale or the short story, however you want to say it, for that one, and I was like, okay, so let's do it. So she just gave me. She was like, how about a Prince and the Pauper retelling? And I was like, okay. So I created everything from that one word. Let's do this. But for the third one, Quirk asked, what do you want to do? And so I told him I wanted to do Beauty and the Beast. And so the third book is going to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling.
Oh, very cool. That's very cool. So you mentioned that, like Once Upon a Con, your Heart of Iron duology is also an adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of spoke to this a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of circle back here.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, between your experiences writing fanfic and your experiences in the traditional publishing world, you're drawn to adaptations. So what is it about the process of adapting someone else's work that appeals to you?
I really like the challenge of it because I like taking the bones of something and dressing them in something new.
Mm.
I mean, that's basically what any story is. Like, no story is original anymore. Everything is a retelling of something else in some way. So I like to take tropes that I really like, and luckily for me, most of those tropes come with the fairy tale with it. So it makes the marketing of it a lot easier. Heart of Iron is not actually an Anastasia retelling. It's just a Lost Princess trope. But it's a lot easier to sell it on the novelty of it being an Anastasia retelling, because everyone knows Anastasia, and not everyone will think of Anastasia as a Lost Princess trope. So, like, most of the time it's just shorthand for, like, how to pitch the book to people who might only have, like, 10 seconds in passing at a con. So yeah, I think I gravitate towards, like, short and very easy to understand pitches, and then I just build off of that.
Well, and you said, too, that you're drawn to the challenge of adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
From a writer's perspective, can you talk about some of the challenges that would come with adapting a work like, say, Cinderella or The Prince and the Pauper?
Most like original fairy tales are steeped in misogyny.
True.
So like that's always a nice challenge for me. Like, say, like for the Cinderella fairy tale, like, Cinderella does not save herself. The prince saves her from her family, and I like the idea of Cinderella saving herself. So I went into retelling Cinderella with the end goal of Elle not having to rely on, like, the prince to save her, but instead her saving the prince, basically. Which I think is also something that Ever After does too, the movie with Drew Barrymore.
Yes. I love that movie.
It's so good.
It really is good, yeah.
That's like almost the perfect movie to like go in saying, okay, this is how you flip a trope. Like Ever After flips the trope so well and so subtly too. But yeah, I went into like I go into fairy tales like loving the bones of it, but wanting to like resituate some of it to fit like I don't know, like a newer narrative. Um, for The Prince and the Pauper, it was a little different because I didn't really adhere too much to the original Mark Twain short story because that's a huge bag of worms. But like the trope of like the oh gosh, what is it? The twin swapping places trope, or like people like disguising as other people, that like it's easier to say, oh, the prince and the pauper than, you know, than people swapping places. And it's easier to sell it on that. But yeah, for Princess and the Fangirl, I didn't really want to dissect the Prince and the Pauper all that much. So instead, I decided to build that retelling around how fandom can sometimes be toxic and the different ways it can be toxic and how to basically not overcome it, but like call it out.
You've given me the perfect stepping off point for some questions that I had for you that pertain to exactly that issue.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, maybe for listeners who haven't read The Princess and the Fangirl, could you just give a quick synopsis of what it's about? And then I've got some questions that I want to explore around that concept of like the toxicity of fandom.
Of course. So The Princess and the Fangirl is about this fangirl named Imogen who switches places with the actress who plays Princess Amara, Jess. And Princess Amara in the first film that was in Geekerella, she gets fridged basically. She dies. And she dies to further Carmen Doors, or the main male characters in Starfield's character arc. And so The Princess and the Fangirl is about Imogen like trying her damnedest to like bring Princess Amara back from the dead. And so she thinks she can do it during ExcelsiCon, which is the big Starfield con. So they switch places, and throughout the story, Imogen finds out that, you know, fandom can not only be, you know, great and a fantastic place to, you know, let your freak flag fly, but also very toxic to certain people. And she, unbeknownst to herself, had contributed to that toxicity.
When I initially read Geekerella, my response was like, this is a love letter to pop culture. This is a love letter to fandom, right? And in some ways presents an idealized portrait of fandom.
Yeah.
But definitely in The Princess and the Fangirl, you are exploring darker corners of fandom. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about like, what was your motivation for that shift?
I think, well, I started planning The Princess and the Fangirl around the time when all that Star Wars stuff went down with Daisy Ridley and the actress for Rose. I didn't like how it was going down, and I'm pretty big into like the sci-fi fandoms like Star Wars and Star Trek. So when I saw that happening, I started to research more about this sort of toxic culture in fandom. And so I went and I talked with other people who have studied like fandom culture, and I explored different places on the internet where like the breeding ground for that sort of thing. And it kind of opened my eyes to, I knew before that fandom was toxic. Like some fandom was toxic. Like there was doxing around back when I was still on LiveJournal. And I was part of the whole like Twilight craze where I like hated Twilight, but I loved it. And it's just, I feel like it's like snowballed from there. And so I had to like look back and take a long, hard look at myself and like what I contributed to the fandoms I was in, and like whether it was positive or negative, and like why it was one thing or another. And so in like exploring that, I realized that was what the story was going to be about. It was going to be about Imogen figuring out that not everything she does is for the good of the fandom as a whole. And it was about Jess figuring out that she can love something unabashedly and trust people in that community when like she thought she couldn't trust anyone.
There's a scene in The Princess and the Fangirl where Jessica, the movie actress, reflects. I'm going to quote the book here at length because I think it really warrants it. Jessica reflects, every time I delete a comment on social media, 2 more take its place, calling me names, critiquing my body and my bones and my career. This is just the thing I didn't want. just the thing I tried to stay out of. But really, I should have known it would come to this, because I'm not just a woman in Hollywood, I'm a woman in fantasy sci-fi Hollywood. This is a big question that maybe you can't speak to, but I'm also a science fiction fan, and I'm curious, what is it about the fantasy and sci-fi fandoms that do inspire the sort of toxic culture that you're depicting in the book?
That's just, ever since that I first got into fandoms, I've known there's been like, I've seen this other part of especially sci-fi and fantasy fandoms where at first it was just them telling me that, oh, I wasn't really a fan. I was just someone who watched Star Trek on the weekends, you know, when I've seen almost every episode of Star Trek in existence. Except for the newest season of Discovery, I haven't seen that yet.
I'm a Star Trek fan too, but I've not seen Discovery either. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, like I love Discovery so far, but I haven't seen the newest season for lots of life reasons. But yeah, and so I think it has something very much to do with the content of the actual things that we're fanning about. Like for instance, in Game of Thrones, women are either like sexually assaulted, tortured, or they die. And like aside from a handful of, you know, main characters, most of the characters in Game of Thrones are men. And like the same can be said for also like Lord of the Rings too. Like there wasn't a single woman in that entire council. It's fine. And just like it's a very like male, like fantasy and sci-fi is very male dominated because it comes from the media that we have consumed, and those have been built on like male narratives. Same with Star Wars too. Luke was basically a Gary Stu, a Mary Sue. He could do anything he wanted to, but the second Rey came onto the screen, everyone was saying, "Oh, she's too perfect." Like, no, so was Luke. Like, stop.
Yeah, he was totally an idealized figure.
Right? It's like there's not a difference here except for the gender.
Yeah.
Like I see what you're doing, but just it's like there are different standards for men and women and non-binary people in fiction, and so I think it stems from like what we consume and like how we consume and whether we just like blindly love it or whether we dissect it and be like, hey, this is problematic, but I can still like something that's problematic. It's not that you can't, it's just that you need to know that, hey, this is not okay, but I can still like it as long as I know that it's not.
As a woman creator who's writing fantasy sci-fi, is that something that you've personally come up against?
Not so far, thankfully. The YA community is really wonderful and very open, and I think if I was a woman writing adult sci-fi or fantasy, I would come up against that, but I haven't yet, thankfully.
Do you think largely because of the genre that you're working in, the YA?
It's definitely because of the genre, because I have friends who are in adult sci-fi and fantasy who have gotten that and who have gotten pushback from their own peers too. So I think it's definitely a genre thing.
I want to come back. Both Geekerella and The Princess and the Fangirl interested me because they contain stories within stories. On the one hand, there's the storyline involving the central characters in the books, but then on a second level, you also present this loose story arc for the fictionalized television show Starfield. How in the heck did you approach plotting those two storylines? And like, what challenges did doing so pose for you? Because I almost feel like after the second book, after Princess and the Fangirl, like, you can write a novel about Starfield. You sort of seem to have Starfield laid out.
Yeah, people, me too.
Can you talk about, like, how did you approach plotting these storylines, and was it difficult?
I plotted them with a lot of wine. No, like, so I knew starting Geekerella, like, somehow, I don't know how, I had the foresight to plan out all 54 episodes of the original TV series. So before I even began drafting, like, the full of Geekerella after I had gotten the job, I was like, okay, I need to know this TV show back and forth, because the main characters do. And so it was basically just it was a way for me to familiarize myself with the characters better, but I ended up doing me a really good solid by plotting out the episodes and knowing that like they were made on TV for syndication, so they couldn't be in any sort of order. So that was tricky, but when I was in college, I interned under a TV and screenwriter, so I kind of knew how to plot that and how to go about planning that. But yeah, I just basically wrote out summaries of all 54 episodes.
Man. So would you have any interest in turning that into a book itself, Starfield?
I mean, I think it's more of a question of like, would Quirk want me to? Because at the end of the day, Starfield belongs to Quirk. So I would love to, but if not, I mean, there's always my original sci-fi, which has a lot of similarities to Starfield.
Both Geekerella and The Princess and the Fangirl prominently feature LGBTQ characters, but you never make their sexual identities a plot point. Can you talk about your motivations for representing a range of diverse identities in the stories that you tell?
Sure. I myself, I'm Demi, so I wanted to write a character who is also Demi. Jessica is also demisexual in Princess and the Fangirl, so I was really happy to finally like write that, even though I never like directly say she is demisexual. I write about like how she feels, and so anyone who is, they're like, oh yeah, she's Demi. And I don't like populating my worlds with the same characters over and over and over again. And I've always been taught that like love is love, and I think that I think you're doing a disservice to your readers for not including like for not building a world that's diverse in both cultures and sexualities and genders. And I think that like I just want to do that. I want to create characters who are diverse and who have all these different stories inside of them. And to do that, it's never really been a question of like, oh, do I do this or do I not do this? I've just always done it.
There's a scene in which one of the characters in The Princess and the Fangirl, I believe it's Harper, says, it's nice to see ourselves represented. If not on screen, then maybe in fan art, fanfic. It's important to show that people like us exist, that we can be happy.
Yes.
Reading the book, I almost feel like you're using the character there as a vehicle to comment on the rationale that you just offered for capturing a wide range of identities in stories.
Yeah, like I don't think that I don't believe in like you have to be this and so you have to suffer for it. I just want people, like any characters, to be happy and to be healthy, and I want to show readers that like you don't have to have a painful gay narrative to be gay. You can just be who you are. And I don't know, that was the one thing that I wanted to hear when I was a teenager. That you're not broken, you're just not like all the heroines you've read, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and as you said, you can be happy.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who teaches literature, something about The Princess and the Fangirl that really interested me was the ways in which it pushes back on the valuing of certain kinds of stories. And I found that really interesting. So there's a scene in the novel where one of the characters, Harper, speaks to that point, and she says, and again, I'll quote the novel, I think it's bullshit that the only meaningful stories are the ones that are deep and pondering and boring, saying all this nonsense without ever saying anything, and you're supposed to, like, read meaning into the yellow wallpaper or something. You know what I think? I think sometimes the stories we need are the ones about taking the hobbits to Isengard and dog-human dudes with space Heelys and trashy King Arthurs and gay ice skating animes and Zuko redemption arcs and space princesses with found families in galaxies far, far away. We need those stories too. Those are the kinds of stories I want to see and read and tell. As somebody who works with educators, I'm very familiar with the hierarchizing of stories that you're critiquing in the book. Like books that aren't perceived as making a profound statement about life or as offering some sort of, I don't know, deep philosophical insight do tend to get dismissed, especially in education circles, as superfluous. So could you talk about the need you see for stories that simply entertain?
Yeah, I think if we want to, since I write mostly young adult, I write for teenagers. And there's a big drop off between like middle schoolers and high school in reading
Mhm.
because like teens are taught that, oh, you have to read Les Shrugged or you have to read Steinbeck or Of Mice and Men, or if you don't read literary works, then your taste is trash. And I think that shies a lot of teens away from books in general because they start associating like every book to like boring word vomit. And I think there's a problem there because books should be an escape, especially in this day and age. And it's been proven that books release the most stress. And so I think there's something to be said about people who like quote unquote like trashy commercial fiction, because I grew up on trashy commercial fiction. I love it. It's also some of the cheapest books you can buy, and it's the books that are most populated in libraries because they're really cheap for libraries to buy as well. So I don't know. I think it's just I was an English major back when I was in college, and so I had to read a lot of very insufferable books, and they did not teach me anything about myself but me reading commercial fiction. I wish I had read Gideon the Ninth, which comes out in September. I wish I had read that like 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, because it is about like necromantic lesbians in space. I learned more from that book than I did from reading like the entire like discography of Steinbeck or Faulkner. So
When you were a kid, were you aware of the stigmas surrounding popular fiction?
I was, because I was in fanfic, and so like commercial fic is like one step above fanfic basically. You have trash taste if you read the extended universes of the Star Wars canon. Like, oh, you're this like weird nerd person. You don't have actual taste. You're just reading candy. And I read a lot of candy, I guess, when I was in middle school then and in
Yeah.
high school. So I did know about the hierarchy, but I didn't really care about it because like that was when YA was like first coming up, and that was when Twilight burst onto the scene. And I think Twilight also like helped divide the like stigma between like, oh, actual literary fiction like Interview with a Vampire and Twilight. It was like, oh, like I love Twilight for what it is. It is trashy, it is candy, it is sparkly vampires, and I am like unabashedly for it. It is what it says it is. It is not trying to be anything else.
I asked that question because I've interacted with high school students, they'll love fan fiction, they'll love comics, and they are cognizant that there is a stigma. Certainly in school, there's a stigma surrounding those books. And gosh, at one school, they even had a term. One of the librarians in the school called it intellectual bullying, right? Like if your popular tastes were to get known, you get teased about that, both from other students and the teachers. And I just think that's it's so sad.
It is. I mean, I had to when I was in middle school, I loved manga so much, but I had to hide it. I would like print out scanlations, which is very illegal, but I didn't know back then. And I would have to like hide these like comics in like my book bag, and I would have to like go to like an unused part of the library and read them during my lunch because I would get picked on for it.
And it's crazy, right? I mean, like, because it's like if we want to promote reading, what are we doing? Like when we're hiding in the corners reading, sneaking in reading.
Right? It's just it doesn't make any sense. And I've talked to people who don't think that graphic novels are actual books, that they shouldn't be counted as books, but they should. It's an art form in and of itself. And a great gateway to get unlikely readers into reading more dense stories, or it's a gateway to get them into reading the entire X-Men franchise.
Speaking of readers, in The Princess and the Fangirl, Jessica discovers that fans of Starfield, and you talked about this a little earlier, have begun a social media campaign to resurrect the character of Princess Amara,
Mm-hmm.
who dies in both the television show and then in its film adaptation. So you're obviously highlighting there a growing trend, it seems, where fans do have the capacity to influence the direction that a media franchise takes. From a creator's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
is the level of input that fans have today over popular culture franchises a good thing, do you think? Does it come with certain pitfalls?
I think it's a double-edged sword. Especially after the whole petition to reshoot the last season of Game of Thrones. I was, what are you guys doing? Just go and read something else. I don't know. Like, I think it really all depends. Like, I think it's like a situational thing where, like, of course I don't condone like bullying art, like the writers or the producers online or anything. And I also don't think that like entire studios need to reshoot a season of Game of Thrones just because they just ran it into the ground. But like, I don't know. I think it's good to have fan interaction. But I think there needs to be a wall there, especially for like smaller creators. I think there does need to be some distance. But
why do you say that?
Well, I think mostly because it's a lot easier for a fan to say, contact me and talk to me.
Okay.
And it's great. I love talking to fans and I absolutely love meeting them and I love discussing all of my books. But once like a book is a book, I can't go back and change it. It's not something that I can do. I can just push forward. And so I am also not the only person who touches my books or who like has a hand in them. There's also like my editor and copy editors and marketing and sales and all of that. So it's just, I don't know. It's definitely like, I think it's a case by case basis. I think for like for bigger series like Star Wars, where like fandom takes up a majority of this property. I don't know. I think it's really hard.
Do you think that your perspective on that question or that issue has changed now that you are situated in the publishing industry as a creator? Like, in other words, like I'm picturing you as a young person writing fanfic. I'm sure that you were probably very eager to have, like, say, J.K. Rowling's ear about directions in which the Harry Potter series might go. Does your perspective change when you become the person responsible for the story world?
I think to a certain extent it does, especially because I have to think about how like certain tropes or certain things that I am portraying, how it affects my reader, especially since I write for teenagers. So right. I think I have to put a lot more thought into what I write than what I did before, is like writing fanfic. Like for instance, I love Reylo. It's a great trope. I mean, that ship is my favorite. It's Kylo Ren and Rey, and it is 120% terrible. And I acknowledge that it's a really bad ship, and I would never write it myself. Well, I would write it, but I wouldn't. And so like it's stuff like that. Like I can write that sort of stuff in fanfic, but I can't write it in like my actual like career as an author, because like it's a really toxic ship, and I wouldn't do it unless I wrote adult and I could like dissect it more and it could be more nuanced. But I think for writing for teens, I don't think that kind of I think to portray that kind of relationship, it takes someone a lot more talented than I am to like do that justice. I do talk about ships, especially like the Reylo-esque ship in the third Geekerella book. So that is actually what I'm building the story off of. So we'll see if I do it justice.
Do your fans ever have opportunities to influence the stories you're writing? Like, do you ever solicit feedback from fans on the direction a story's taking?
Not really. Mostly because I write very isolated, and also if I open the door to have other people like give me suggestions on what to do, then I risk like them like they have ownership of of something that I am writing, which like when I'm done writing it and it's out in the world, it's not mine anymore. It's now like my readers or my fans. It's their work. I believe in the death of the author. When something is out, it's out.
You mentioned Ashley writing in isolation. I was actually going to ask you, like, what does a creative day look like for Ashley Poston? Could you walk me through a day that you're going to sit down and you're going to be creative, you're going to write? How do you start that day? Like, what does it look like as you go through the course of the day?
Sure. Usually, I wake up around, oh, this is gonna make me sound so lazy. I wake up around 11, actually.
Oh, man. But that's only because you were writing until 3 in the morning, right?
Actually, yes. So publishing doesn't really wake up until 10 a.m., right? And I'm on the East Coast, so I wake up just in time to like get some emails in. I usually do business work during the day. I do emails, I respond to people, I set up like convention things, I set up travel, stuff like that. And then I start writing around 4 or 5, and I take a break at 7 to 9. And then I write from 9 to probably about 2 a.m.
Do you really? So you were serious?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's something I envy that. Like, as a writer, I found like I can write in the morning. I can't write in the evening, but that works for you.
Yeah, I like when I'm drafting, I get my best drafting in at around 9 to 2 a.m. because like it's quiet. I don't have any distractions. There's nothing happening during the day. I don't have to respond to emails. So that's like my sweet spot. But when I'm editing, I usually change my schedule and my circadian rhythm just like goes haywire. Because I have to be editing during the day so that if I ever come across something that I need my editor's input in, I can email them during the day. And so they can like email you back and we can talk through something. So when I'm editing, I usually edit from like the regular business day, like 10 to maybe 5:30, with like a lunch break in between. So it really all depends on like what I'm juggling and like at what point do I, like what stage I'm in writing.
Do you have a part of the process that you enjoy more than others? Like, do you enjoy the editing, or do you enjoy the act of just kind of getting the content down on the screen?
I That's really hard because I enjoy both of them. I really like drafting because it's just a blank page and it's just full of possibilities and anxiety. But I really love editing too because everything is there and all I got to do is like clean it up and I just got to make it better. And once you have something that's fully finished, it's easier to like go back and actually, polish it. But while you're drafting something, you don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know sometimes where you're going. Sometimes the outline just completely goes off the rails. So it really all depends on my mood.
Yeah, yeah. And I got to say, you're one of the first writers, I think, who has embraced the anxiety of the blank screen. That sort of jumped out at me.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It does terrify you?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying. I hate it so much, which is why I do not write in order. I usually always have my outline below in my Word document that I'm drafting in. And so there's always something below where I've ended my like writing for the day so that I don't get like frozen when I open it up the next day and see like a blank page. So there's like nothing blank. It's just there's like nothing in order and there's not like what really freezes me up is when I get to the end of a sentence and there's like a long like blank page after that. I hate that so much. So I do whatever I can to make sure that there's not like any like blankness beneath it. I fill it with anything I can.
Oh, I like that idea. Is there a project, you mentioned Beauty and the Beast?
Mm-hmm. The title is Bookish and the Beast.
Bookish and the Beast?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you've already written that's going to be coming out soon?
Yes. The first draft is done. I'm waiting on edits. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be the third and maybe final book in the Once Upon a Con series. And
did you choose the fairy tale this time around that you wanted to write?
Mm-hmm.
You did. What made you choose Beauty and the Beast, out of curiosity?
Beauty and the Beast is my absolute favorite fairy tale of all time. I know so much about it that I'm kind of ashamed. So I was like, I'm going to do Beauty and the Beast this time. And I had a really great character in Princess and the Fangirl that I wanted to do more with, but the only fairy tale that like really stuck out at me that I could put him in was a Beauty and the Beast because he is just an absolute asshole. So.
And do you have a sense of when that book will come out? Would that be like 2020 or 2021?
It'll come out next summer.
Next summer? Oh, yeah. Excellent.
So
awesome.
Summer 2020.
Well, I can't wait. As I said, these books, both the Once Upon a Con and the Heart of Iron books, just so fun to read. Once I start down them, I cannot set them down. I'm devouring them. So I'll be really excited to see that come out.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, Ashley, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me about your work. I really appreciate it.
It was an absolute delight. Thank you so much for having me.
And with that, we've reached the end of another episode of the Storyteller's Thread. If you liked what you heard, please tell a friend about the show. I'm looking forward to seeing you back here next month when we'll continue to talk about the craft of storytelling. Till then, happy reading.